All right, origins of my best friend's wedding. This all starts with a man named Ronald Bass, who was already a hugely successful Oscar-winning screenwriter of Rain Man, among many other credits, Sleeping with the Enemy, The Joy Luck Club, Waiting to Exhale. And he attended a Chicago society wedding, and he thought, this is the perfect setting for a movie. And he says, quote, here from an interview in 2017 with E! Online, quote, it was one of those 4-day-long parties where everyone comes in and there are all kinds of events and it's a huge show. I realized it's such a long weekend that plenty of interesting things can happen. And that was the birth of the movie. And then he had the hook of the movie that the hero of the movie doesn't win in the end, that, the movie star lady doesn't get the guy in the end. And as a result, lots of studios were skeptical of the idea. But the studios eventually, 2 different studios made an offer and attached a star to it. One was an unnamed studio with Sandra Bullock, and then the other one, the winning bid, was from Sony with Julia Roberts attached to it. And Julia Roberts was a fan of an Australian director named P.J. Hogan, who had made a movie called Muriel's Wedding.
I love that movie.
And she thought he could get the tone right for what this movie is going for.
Yeah.
And so PJ Hogan, he gets signed to direct. There is a book that I started reading, a great book called From Hollywood with Love by Scott Meslow, about sort of the 90s era of the golden era of rom-coms in Hollywood. And PJ Hogan said, quote, the main note while developing and producing Muriel's Wedding was the main character is not sympathetic. We hate her, meaning notes from the studio. The main character is not sympathetic. We hate her. And I was like, well, I love her.
Yeah.
And so then he talks about reading the script for my best friend's wedding. And he said, quote, what really surprised me was that it wasn't really very romantic. In fact, my experience of reading the screenplay was, wow, I'm not sure I like her very much. And usually in romantic comedies, everything the main character does in order to win love and to find happiness is totally justified, even if it's kind of awful. What Meg Ryan does to Bill Pullman in Sleepless in Seattle is kind of awful. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, God, it's got that goddamn romantic comedy problem. She's kind of awful. And I got to the end and she didn't get the guy. And I thought, oh my God, that's the point. This takes the form and smashes it on the floor. Most romantic comedies are about how all's fair in love and war, which is something I've never really believed in. And this was a screenplay about how all is not fair in love and war. It was a romantic comedy that wasn't very romantic, end quote.
Yeah, well, that's because they give you someone truly deserving and hard not to root for in Cameron Diaz's character. And if it were going to be your typical rom-com setup, we would start to see the cracks in Cameron pretty clearly. And they try. They try to give you a couple, but you basically know they deserve to be together the whole time.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I've watched it and really gotten across the point of, Jules is not the same temperament as Michael. He is more affectionate, more sincere. He's more of a romantic, and like those parts of him, even if she convinced herself that he's the best thing ever, those are why it didn't work and wouldn't. She doesn't have the stomach for it, where that's what you see in him. And what is her name? What is Cameron?
Kimmy.
In Kimmy's character, in all the scenes where you're like, oh, they really should be together, is this like, they're just so open and so not at all ashamed of like being affectionate and loud, and I don't know.
And him being more affectionate, more sentimental, he probably tones that down around Julia Roberts because she doesn't respond well to him, to that part of him. And I think there's a good sort of understated scene where Julianne is her character's name. Why do they
call her Jules?
Where Julia Roberts as Jules is watching Cameron Diaz and Dermot Mulroney, passionately kissing and stuff. Or no.
Talking about the karaoke scene or the fight scene?
Yeah, I've got it backwards. Sorry. I was thinking it's got the good, new spouse, new romantic partner sees the person with their old friend and now they're sort of acting a lot different. So I've gotten it backwards, but it is, she sees how like connected they are and how like their verbal tennis going back and forth and telling stories to each other that she's not included in.
Hey, you have to stop saying she, especially when you're confusing things. Okay. So this whole time I thought you meant Jules is seeing something, but you're saying Kimmy is seeing.
Yes. Is now seeing how he acts with her. And maybe it's a little different from the guy that she knows. But it also just that thing in life of seeing the person you're in a relationship with reuniting with someone from their past, and now they're kind of acting a little different, and it's a little strange, or just, wow, this person has a kind of relationship with that I don't get to see.
That's interesting you're reading that. I think that they did a good job of expressing and showing just a long-standing friendship, and friendship that developed a lot of stories, and you've got two people who like to reference those stories, and maybe you've got like a lot of inside jokes because you're two people who like to say inside jokes, and so you end up witnessing two people who have like a language you don't know yet, and you might not ever know, and it kind of makes you sick, but that doesn't mean that either of them are acting like they normally wouldn't, and that also, just because they don't, I'll bet if you were to look at your relationship with that person, you'd see you guys also have inside jokes and references like that. And maybe the longevity of your relationship just isn't there yet. Or maybe you're not the kind of person who likes that kind of banter. I don't think that makes the other person different. I didn't mean that they were necessarily acting different. It's just how jarring it is to see your partner having this very, very profound relation. I remember the first time, our last guest from last episode, Caleb, the first time you met Caleb, Caleb, since our entire adult lives lives in a different city for me. But the first time you met him, you hung out with the two of us, and you said to me later, you're like, I've never seen you smile that much. He makes you smile more than anybody. So it was like, I don't know. You're just like, oh, hey, Matt can act happy and smiley and stuff. He just delights you in a way. He doesn't say anything that makes you feel like you need to give him a lecture. He doesn't embarrass you. It's just, he's very unique. He doesn't bring up things that make you groan or things you don't want to think about or talk about. He's just positive, and it's the kind that you can stomach. I don't know how he does it. The perfect man. Okay. Yeah. PJ Hogan said about Julia Roberts, quote, Julia was absolutely committed to Julianne's dark side, which no one, I think, had allowed her to do in her previous romantic comedies. She was so committed to the dark side that I was a little bit worried, end quote. So they got Julia Roberts on board, but who were going to play the other roles? PJ Hogan wanted his fellow Aussie Russell Crowe to play I could see that. Michael, an up-and-coming Russell Crowe who hadn't really broken through in Hollywood yet. But Julia Roberts had casting approval, so they had to win her over. So they invited Russell Crowe to a table read, and PJ Hogan said, quote, I don't know what went wrong. It was one of the worst table reads I've ever experienced. Russell was seated opposite Julia. He gripped the script, and he stared at the script, and he didn't look at her once. He read every line in a monotone. At one point, Julia was literally leaning over the table, staring like inches from Russell's face, trying to make eye contact, and he wouldn't look at her. At the end of the reading, Russell came up to me and said, I thought it went pretty well. What? And then I knew Russell was not going to be in my best friend's wedding. End quote. Okay. So some women up for the part of Kimmy, the part that ultimately went to Cameron Diaz, were Drew Barrymore, Callista Flockhart, and Reese Witherspoon. And Julia Roberts wanted Drew Barrymore very much. And Hogan said, quote, Kimmy was a really important part because you're up against Julia Roberts, who the audience expects to get the guy at the end. If Julia's character wipes the floor with Kimmy, the film isn't going to work. Julia is a movie star, and movie stars don't usually share the screen with other movie stars, but whoever plays Kimmy has to be a movie star as well. End quote. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. They perfectly picked, and they picked Cameron Diaz at a good time in her career too. She is young and can still be very sweet and demure in a way, but then she's got that fierceness. It's just, Drew Barrymore is such a little powder. I just think of her as a spark plug. I think of her as dominating a movie. I don't know. Yeah, it's such a hard balance. I can't think of many people that could have done Kimmy better than what we saw. Yeah, it's probably my favorite performance in the movie, and it has to be exactly what he just said. It can't steal the thunder from her, but it has to be somebody who can hold her own. Yes. And then the age difference, it's just a few years. Right. And why the movie has to make her, she's 20 years old in the movie. I realized while I was trying to fall back asleep last night, a big part of her plot thing is that she's not stopping her life after getting it started. She's stopping her career before she's even going to get the degree she needs to have that career. So I think they needed her to be young so that it seemed like there was a disadvantage. It gives you a little something to like not love about her for whatever reason. And so that she can feel like she's putting her life on hold for that to be a big enough struggle in what ultimately shakes up. Yeah.
There has to be like, because Julia Roberts was 29 or 30 when she made the movie, and so they need to have her actually feel like this is a much younger woman and have that threat. But like, how much younger can you make it without it being creepy? I'd say a 20-year-old, and Cameron Diaz was 25 when she made the movie, but they make her character 20 years old. I mean, our
22 would have made me feel better.
Yes, a 20-year-old getting married sounds tragic in any scenario.
It does.
Sounds like a horrible mistake. Our teenager we were having dinner with last night talking about this, like, in 6 years is going to get married to Dermot Mulroney. Ugh. Yeah.
No, thank you. And they did great with the costume choices too. Just the striking difference between how Cameron Diaz dresses versus Jules. It helps make a smoking hot person like Cameron Diaz a little less intimidating looks wise, while still having that like gorgeously perfect face and hair and all that. But the clothes are not revealing she's not like a sex kitten. She's just
oh, that's interesting.
And but they let Julia's character be sexy more than almost every time she's on the screen. She's sexy.
The role went to Cameron Diaz. She had just broken out in The Mask in '95, but this was before that. There's Something About Mary. This before she's like an A-lister.
Right.
But the trade-off was Julia Roberts wanted Dermot Mulroney to play Michael, and so she could get that if Cameron Diaz got to play Kimmy. Mm-hmm. That's how you end up with those three. So there were a bunch of things happened. They filmed the movie without the confrontation between Julia Roberts and Cameron Diaz at the White Sox Stadium. They didn't include that. And then in the original ending of the movie, which you can watch on YouTube, Julia Roberts is at the wedding ceremony, at the after party. And she gets her phone call from George, but George is still in New York. He's not present at the wedding. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, you'll be fine, kid, or whatever. And she's like, oh, okay. And then this new guy played by John Corbett shows up and he's like, say, who are you? And,
no.
Yeah. And then she gets wet and then they all go dance together.
Gross.
Now, apparently, and she says, she turns him down at first, but she's still talking on her cell phone. And George is like, what are you doing there? So she goes and finds him, and it's the beginning of something beautiful. Now, apparently Tess audiences fucking hated this.
Yeah. Cause she doesn't need a person to make two, she doesn't need to be spoken for to neutralize her. She needs to neutralize herself. Otherwise, she's always a threat. She needed to show restraint while single. Otherwise, every time Jules is in between relationships, Kimmy needs to be worried. And that's not, you can't imagine a sustained friendship based on Jules not coming to the realization she's not the right woman on her own and without this little treat on the side.
Yeah, and what's the sacrifice if you immediately get presented with a brand new hunk?
And you're not really, she still needs to process all that she did and all that she thinks she wanted. And she immediately goes into another relationship. She's just going to be comparing that person to Michael, which what she needs to stop doing is what she needs to start doing is to figure out how to stop thinking about him in that way.
Mm-hmm. But the studio said like she needs to end up with, it's a romantic comedy. It's Julia Roberts. She needs to end up with somebody. We're already taking a big chance by not having her end up with, the guy of the movie. But this is a rare case of test screenings being useful. Audiences reacted against this. They felt like Julianne didn't deserve to get rewarded like this. They liked the movie basically until the last act, but they felt like Kimmy was way too forgiving of her for all the horrible shit she does to both of them. And so they went back, they added the scene in the White Sox Stadium, which is my favorite scene in the movie. Mm-hmm. And then they changed the ending where her gay best friend joins her at the wedding and is like, listen, you're not going to fuck tonight, but we're best friends and we can dance and have fun together. Well, so it's like, it's about different kinds of love.
And this is the best possible thing because what she's really losing is a best friend. This seems to be the person she would have anytime she had downtime. It seemed like it was with Michael, and that's a decade of doing that. Once that person gets married, and after you did all of this before the wedding, you're not getting alone time with Michael anymore. You shouldn't, or you're many years away from it. She really is losing her best friend. And in the form she knows him in. So the fact that they replace him with someone who would get on a plane and come out and see her through this, not once but twice, is showing you like, okay, that they've really strengthened their friendship, and that's like, that's more rewarding. And her freaking laugh and smile and big old teeth and all that are just so fucking endearing. And every time he makes her laugh, I'm laughing too. And it was, this was a nice way to end.
George Rupert Everett, who was only in 2 scenes in the script, they had him in mind, and so they really wanted to beef up that character, knowing they wanted to cast him, but they were happy that they got to involve him even more in the final product, because they were realizing this guy's really popping. He's the, our favorite part of the movie. And the tension between Ronald Bass, the screenwriter, and PJ Hogan, the director, because they were rewriting the script together, Bass wanted it to be way more of a straightforward movie. Like, it's got the hook of the woman not getting the guy in the end, but otherwise he wants it to be a very grounded traditional rom-com, and Hogan wants it to be he said he basically wanted it to be a stealth musical. It's not
a stealth musical.
Okay. Like, you don't notice it's a musical, but you're like, there's like 5 musical sequences in this movie, and it has a kind of heightened reality to it the whole time. And he suggests later it's the tension between those two that makes the movie what it is, because it's both things at once.
Yeah, well, and just the addition of the 2 relatives, the 2 other women in the movie, they are so over the top and can sing and do sing and are singing. They seem like they are from a play and not a movie. And it totally works, but they have those moments where it's just like, where are we? Yes.
And that the I Say a Little Prayer for You sequence at the restaurant was a big thing. The studio was like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you going for? And I think, I haven't seen Muriel's Wedding, but he said, and I wish I had, he said that he figured that out during that movie as well, that you have these musical sequences, these unexpected musical sequences, they really help you cling on to the characters better if the characters are doing things that you don't understand or don't approve of. And usually things like, an entire restaurant bursting out into song is the kind of thing I fucking hate.
But they made it so believable in the kind of restaurant they chose, in the way that it progresses, in the fact that there's a piano that's actually in the room. There's no way someone would be singing that song at a table 2 tables away from me, and I wouldn't also. I mean, you just get into it,
Yeah,
and then the waiters have crab claws, so why not wave them around? I mean.
Yeah, at least, like, I wouldn't want to be an asshole, so I would start singing too.
You would clap. That's always your contribution. Things. You add rhythm.
Yeah, so I don't know. This movie's charm won this cynical heart over at least. And that's the history of My Best Friend's Wedding.
What do you know?
Folks, now we'll move on to talk about the movie itself.